Support Lightning Debate on Patreon.
Hi guys, Jeff here. So I'm coming at you with a new video breaking down the November-December topic. So for this breakdown, I'm just going to be covering the definitions and helping you understand what the topic is asking you to do on the debate level, and briefly going over some quick thoughts I feel about how this topic is constructed and some potential arguments that are going to be made on the topic. And I'll cover more in-depth analysis in the analysis video, but this one's just going to be quick, making sure the topic is understood and you have some quick branching off points to go when you go into your in-depth and research and analysis. So the first thing I want to talk about is the resolution. Obviously, that's where we got to start. So the resolution for this month, or these couple of months rather, is: in a democracy, the public's right to know ought to be valued above the right to privacy of candidates for public office. So let's go right into it. The first part, which is in a democracy. So important to know about this part, it specifies no actor. This is not an action that needs to be taken. It is simply a philosophical statement that needs to be proven or disproven. So you don't have any specific actor. And since there is not a specific actor, and it also states in a democracy, this means it is not specific to the United States. So since it's not US specific, you're going to have a wide array of topicality going from basic philosophical aspects to worldwide impact. If you are going into the real world, it's going to be affecting all democracies, not just the US style of democracy. Another point, like I said before, it's going to be more philosophical than literal since it's not an actor. There's not an actor, and there's no and the specific constraint on the topic is just a democracy, which is more broad. So there's going to be more philosophical grounds than literal grounds because it's going to be really hard to come up with concrete impacts and disads when you're going in on the literal. However, I'm not saying it's not going to be done. There is always someone who's going to be able to do it, but it's saying overall, in general, on the topic, I'm going to see more philosophical debates rather than literal debates. All right, and the next thing I'm going to tell you about is, since it's going to be more philosophical in general, you're probably going to require more fleshed out frameworks with either more observations or more explanation on how they function or why they are justified, in order to really get a good stance and be able to present a well established case to the judge. All right, the next part to cover is the public's right to know. It's self-explanatory, but there are key questions to raise about this. The first one is the right to know what? Do I have a right to know medical records, political affiliation? Do I want to know your grades in high school or whatever in college? Do I want to know your personal opinions? What is the public's right to know what exactly? That needs to be answered by the AF. All right, so the next question to ask is, who is the public? Is the public the government? Is the public the people? Is it a combination of both? Is it not even just the people governed by the democracy? Is it everyone in the world? Like, who does the public constitute? All right, the next thing also to talk about is the availability versus the distribution dilemma. So when we're talking about the public's right to know, there are two ways to interpret right to know. The first part is availability. People have to have information available to them. This would be like a library. As long as you have a library card and you live in that district, that all the books in that library are available to you. As long as you go, you physically yourself to the library, you go, you pick out a book, and you're able to have all that information. As long as you yourself are proactive, it's available to you. The second point is the distribution interpretation of the government is responsible for letting people know. about these things. This would be like Miranda rights. When you are arrested, the officer needs to tell you what rights you have available and what you are allowed to do from this point on. So, is the public's right to know in this situation a question of availability? The government need to let you know? Means rather, the government needs to have information available to you if you were to try and obtain it, or the distribution aspect where if it is important to you to know, therefore the government has an obligation to let you know about it, which is something that needs to be clarified by the AF. All right. Next thing to talk about is valued above. So this makes the burdens for this debate exceptionally clear compared to the burdens of other debates on how the ballot is going to be chosen, at least in my mind. So ties, in my mind, are going to go to the neg. If you tie and you are the AF, you lose because it specifically says valued above. Therefore, the AF needs to win at least 51-49 that the right to right for the public to know is greater than even the slightest way than privacy for candidates. Anything else goes neg. And also, since the word value is used here, there's going to be a lot more philosophical foundation to either side. So like I said before, you're going to have to flesh out your framework. And the contention level debaters who want to have a more contention level literal debate, they might still be able to do it, but they're going to have to flesh out their framework a little better in order to make sure they're going to have enough power behind their contentions in order to combat the other side in order to have access to the ballot. All right. The next part is the right to privacy of candidates for public office. So it's self-explanatory, but again, there are key questions about this. The first one is, what is considered privacy? Is privacy considered preventing people from knowing things that you consider personal? Is it protection against governmental probes or news outlets from conducting investigation? What is considered privacy? All right, the next thing are what type of candidates. If you have a a multi-tier governmental system, which has local level and federal level, are only local level candidates have this right? Do federal level candidates have that right? Do both of them have the right, or do none of them have the right? Which level candidate? And like, depends on what type of governmental system you're talking about in a democracy. And the next thing they talk about is which public offices. Is it any office that is elected? Is it any office that has like appointments? Like, which public offices are we talking about? Are we talking about all of them? Or are we talking about specific amount types of them? Which public offices are the ones that are really going to these are going to apply to? All right, so potential affirmative arguments that I'm thinking off the top of my head. So don't go straight into these, but these are the ones that I've thought about. So the first one is, of course, mentioning the clear inspiration for this topic, which is the Kavanaugh trials and other sexual related scandals that have derailed special politicians. So that's increasing the people's desire to know more about their candidates in case they have skeletons in their closets in order to properly assess what type of people they are. And there are also other claims for anti-corruption cases, for example, with Trump's tax returns and how he didn't release them. People wanted to know and him to release the tax returns in order for transparency. He never did, so they're feeling that they want to have a right to know if he actually paid taxes. The Brazilian elections with the multiple corruption scandals at this point, that's been a whole mess. I would suggest you to look into those things. And with things like Venezuela, where Maduro has not been very transparent in his dealings with how he's been governing the economy. So they want to be able to help prevent those sort of actions by helping have an understanding of what he was doing in office or what he's doing in office. And that also relates to republic efficiency. So being able to, in a republic where people are choosing representatives in a republic democracy, it's important to be able to know who you're voting for and have adequate knowledge of that person in order to make a fair assessment on that person's ability to serve as a representative of the people. So the people need to have adequate information about that person in order to make an educated vote for or against that person. And also, it serves as a governmental check to keep the government from preventing you to know about candidates so they can push their own successors into office or push their own agendas. Us being able to understand who they are as a person allows us to better identify people who are more corrupt or undesirable traits and keep those people out of public office. And it's going to be more favorable in the app to use utilitarian calculus because of the way the resolution is written, and most of the information that most of the arguments would fall under proving some sort of utilitarian calculus, some sort of benefit to knowing more that would explain why it should be valued more. That's just my 2 cents on the issue. So the next thing are the negative arguments. The first thing to talk about is privacy as a basic human right, which most people are going to postulate that everyone has a right to privacy. So just because you become a candidate does not mean that you should forfeit that basic human right to privacy, and you should have the ability to not have things that you deal as overly revealing be revealed to the public without your consent. And also the idea of state media as a weapon. This is more used if you're trying to talk about cases like Russia, where Putin would use the military and state media and leak information about his opponents in order to mar them and prevent them from being able to challenge him. So that would be a negative or disadvantageous disad of the public's right to know, where false information is spread using state media in order to about candidates in order to or false or damaging information is released about candidates in order to keep them from obtaining public office and keep those who are in power staying in power. All right, and this also relates to the idea of using content ethics. You wouldn't want people to know private and disturbing things about you. Therefore, you shouldn't make anyone else reveal those things about themselves. That sort of reciprocality element to content ethics would play nicely into a framework on the neg. All right, so now let's go into some DAs and Ks. Some Ks I thought of. The first one was in all governments, not just democracies. So it clearly states at the beginning that the right to know is more important. It should be valued above the right to privacy in a democracy. However, with this K, you can state it's not just in a democracy. It should be valid. It should be valid in all forms of government. In a dictatorship, the people have a right to know what candidates for public office are going to do when they are appointed by the dictator or other forms of government. Depending on how their people are appointed, they have a right to know how their government is functioning in order to make sure that public trust is kept within the government. So that's a good way of helping upend the sort of offense and changing the scope of the debate with that sort of K and taking that sort of approach on the topic. Next way is taking it on the other side and talking about holders of public office are more important than candidates. How we only are talking about candidates for public office, but the people who actually hold legitimate political power are people who already have political office. And it's more important for us to know about things about people who already are in political office. So once they are renewed for their political office, we are able to have adequate information to understand whether or not they should be renewed or keep their seat. And a possible DA is a DA on the idea of a surveillance state, where this could lead into a slippery slope where the government is watching everyone, and this sort of society where everyone needs to be watched and privacy and the public's right to know is valued more than privacy, what causes everyone to be watching everyone all the time and stifles the ideas of freedom and liberty. So it's going to cause negative effects by trying to produce this sort of ideal and in this a society which could cause dangerous consequences. All right, guys, so that's the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Comment down below what videos you want to see later, and I'll see you guys around. Jeff out.